Listeners, beware. This podcast contains themes of the macabre and does not shy away from the details. Our content is graphic and our language is colorful. We might not be your cup of tea, so listener discretion is strongly advised. Hosted by two best friends with a proclivity to decipher the deeply demented minds of murderers.
Welcome to Season 3, Episode 2 of The Killer Tea. On today's episode, we will be discussing David Brom,
The child axe killer.
We are your hosts, Christina
and Chelsea.
Second episode. This one is going to be a little bit different. Have we ever done a mass murderer versus a serial killer? I don't think we've done a mass murderer.
No, we normally stick strictly to serial killers, but this case was too interesting for us to pass up.
Yes. So obviously you guys should be used to our format by now. We typically just stick to serial killers or alleged serial killers. David Brom is a minor at the time these horrendous acts are committed. So just bear that in mind. We will be talking about a young man committing very, very heinous crimes, but he kills multiple people at one time rather than over a period of time. Technically not our usual format, but we doing it today. David Brom was the second child out of 4 born to Bernard and Paulette Brom on October 3rd, 1971. When the couple was just 25 years old. Brom's parents had met while they were both attending nearby colleges in Collegeville, Minnesota. Super unique name. Can't imagine what the main industry is there. Bernard had attended the all-private, all-men's Roman Catholic college, St. John's University, while Paulette attended the university right across the street. So if you're envisioning this, you have the all-men's college, then the all-women's college, and the all-women's college was St. Benedict's. It is said that Bernard was a top student and he was very dedicated to his work. These two did not grow up together. They just met at college. They fell in love very quickly. They ended up both switching to the University of Minnesota and eventually get married via a Catholic wedding. And everything was sunshine and rainbows, perfectly normal. There's nothing really noteworthy. Bernard was offered a position as an advisory engineer at IBM, which for the 70s,
that's a big deal.
That's pretty impressive. And the newlyweds ended up starting their new life together with a big move 2 hours away to Rochester, Minnesota.
Bernard and Paulette were raised in Catholic families and were both deeply devout. Bernard would serve at Pax Christi Catholic Church as a Eucharistic minister, and he and Paulette would even become leaders in a marriage counseling program. The couple would raise their family within the faith and were community leaders at Pax Christi.
Paulette served for several years as the director of the church's preschool, and she really only quit the position because she wanted to be a stay-at-home mom and spend more time with her own children in the mid-1980s. Even Bernard would eventually take up jogging and repairing an old car with David Brom, his son, in order to spend more time with them. You know, this is kind of the picturesque family. The community members don't really take note of any abuse. They're all very loving. The family is like super nuclear.
Yep. And while not much more is known about the Brom family, there may be a slight history of mental illness on Bernard's side. His mother, Catherine Brom, which would be David's paternal grandmother, admitted that she and her mother and grandmother had all suffered from an undisclosed mental illness, presumably probably depression, and Catherine's own father, Bernard's grandfather, and David's great-grandfather had committed suicide. So there could be some depression in the family, but apart from that, there's not a whole lot of issues going on. And from what we could find, there seems to have been no signs of abuse or even hard physical discipline like what we have talked about in the past with other killers, we do know that their parenting wasn't viewed by those closest to the family as overbearing or extreme, like they weren't super strict or anything like that. And most people would just say that, sure, they were strict, but they were fair and held all their children to the same standard. So I just imagine that they're probably like a pretty stereotypical Catholic family.
Yeah, and even we're accustomed to hearing sometimes with religious families, spare the rod, spoil the child, like that kind of stuff. And that's not translated in any of this. And all the research that I did, all of the people in their community, their neighbors, the kids at school, they said the parents were strict, but nothing crazy, nothing abusive, even for that period of time.
Right.
Because you've heard us say it a million times, what was considered normal parenting, 30, 40, 50 years ago, nowadays would be
considered very abusive. Even when friends and neighbors were later interviewed, they described the kids' upbringing as basically what people would consider the American dream, if you will. Two parents who are married and in love, holidays at grandparents' houses, big family gatherings, outdoor activities, family vacations. I mean, we're talking about like the picturesque middle class style.
They had a beautiful home and a nice neighborhood, and they had the benefit of financial security from Bernard's job at IBM. Like, mom was able to stay at home. So I think you guys get it. Like, kid seems to have a pretty decent life.
Which makes this all the more horrific.
Yeah, and not to say, like, you can have a great life and a great upbringing and still have a chemical imbalance and still have depression and things like that.
Absolutely.
But
this is just abnormal.
Yes, this is just a bit more than that. So, like their parents, all the Brom children would attend private Catholic school their entire lives. Each child was noted as doing very well in school with no records of bad grades or poor attendance or really any difficulties whatsoever. As for David, everyone who knew him described him as a happy, somewhat popular kid who would shovel a neighbor's driveway for free and was trusted enough to babysit for family and for friends. He was even described as being very sociable with lots of friends across the board. The only thing worth mentioning is that the couple's oldest son, Joe, was a bit of a rebel. And at this point, it's the 1980s. Like, punk rock.
Sex, drugs, and rock and roll,
Anarchy in the UK, man. The Sex Pistols.
And let's be honest, rebellion is what teenagers do.
The whole culture of the 80s was rebellion. So it's really not
we're talking like the ushering in of like the grunge rock era and like all of that. After graduating high school, Joe moved in with a friend and started working at a local restaurant. But honestly, like we said, he was your prototypical...
And this is the brother. This is now,
here.
To a Catholic family.
This is crazy.
Yeah, but the parents argued with him about it, but the kid still moved out and had his own place, had a job.
Being very responsible in his punk rock rebellion.
Yeah, it was very woe is me, mom and dad don't understand me, religion sucks, anarchy, blah, 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 blah. So you don't need to be a true crime detective to see, there's arguments happening at the house and family's not really thrilled with this whole thing. So Joe, the older brother, becomes a bit of a black sheep, but he wasn't cast aside or shunned from the family. And David completely idolized his older brother, right? Because he was super cool. If you have an older sibling that is like a little on the edge rebellious, you're kind of like, wow, my God, they're so cool. Like, I had a sister just like that. I completely understand and empathize. But they remained close. Joe even got his little brother a dishwashing job on the side at the restaurant where Joe worked. And it was really hard on David Brom when his older brother, his idol, moved out of the house. So we'll give him some credit there.
Right. For all intents and purposes, the Broms lived a perfectly average middle-class American life, And if a kid who listens to punk rock music and colors his hair is the worst of your problems, I'd say you're doing pretty solid.
Yeah.
After his brother left, David became a bit down on himself, and much like his rebellious older brother, was feeling a bit oppressed by his family's stringent religious lifestyle. And he took up listening to punk rock music, expressing a desire to want to color his hair and dressing a bit more grunge, just like his older brother. His normal, happy, and charismatic demeanor changed a little bit, becoming more withdrawn and morose. We're talking he's like 15, 16. Yeah. I think most 15 and 16-year-olds kind of withdraw a little bit at this age.
Yes, I personally can attest to this fact. Currently living it right now.
Right. So, I mean, of course, this led Bernard and like I said, 16-year-old David to having their share of disagreements. And the 1980s was an incredibly transformative decade for the nuclear family, and especially for a young person who's being introduced to a culture and ideas that are very much the polar opposite of the world that he's been raised in, because they have been raised in a very devout Catholic home.
Yep, you basically can't get any more opposite of anarchy and punk rock to
fire and brimstone, you're going to hell.
But, the other thing here is David Brom is still going to church with his parents. Mm-hmm. They're, according to everybody around them, like, he's still devout, it appears.
Yeah.
And religion still seems to be important to him.
Yeah, they're still going to private school and all of that, so.
David started showing signs of depression. Mm-hmm. It started when his brother moved out, and then he had two best friends that also relocated around the same amount of time.
Which is very hard for any kid to go through.
Yeah, he's going through some isolation. But his depression escalates, and he attempted to commit suicide at least 2 times in 1987. Now, of course, this was all kept very hush-hush by his parents for a variety of reasons. First of all, this is before social media. Like, not everything is everybody's business. Second of all, it's deeply personal. Mental health issues are not discussed.
Nobody had a therapist in the 1980s.
Nobody had a therapist in the 1980s. And this is my personal observation. There was no information on the internet to back this up, just literally me. They come from a very stringent Catholic upbringing. And in that upbringing, suicide is the unforgivable sin.
Well, yeah, in Catholicism, I mean, if you kill yourself, that's it. Like, I don't even think you can have a Catholic funeral if you kill yourself.
Yes. So I was wondering if maybe that may have also played a role in it. And again, people just don't talk about mental health. There isn't mental health advocacy like there is now. Mm-hmm. That kind of stuff. Basically, talk of that matter was strictly taboo.
Right. Like we said, everything also seems to be pretty much business as usual with them. And a family friend of Paulette recalled hearing only very briefly that her friend had been struggling with David, but really didn't know how serious the issues had become. Again, we're talking about the 1980s where people just didn't talk about the issues with their children. But there was still no indication of anything serious going on, or that there was any signs that David may act out violently.
So there's one thing about violence against yourself with suicide or suicidal ideation. Violence against others, you would think there would be some sort of outburst. There's no fire starting. There's no getting in fights. There's no bullying. There's no nothing.
I mean, depression and wanting to kill yourself is one thing, but lashing out violently at others is usually like a different set of issues there.
You're not going to find books upon books filled with homicidal ideation, and this isn't like a Columbine kind of thing.
Right.
It's, from what we can see, it seems directed inwardly.
Right.
Spurred by not getting along with mom and dad, and life is super stressful because I can't dress the way I want to dress and listen to the music I want to.
I mean, we've been there.
Yeah. Nothing violent towards other people. And again, he's still attending church, whether or not that's because he wants to, because he's at school and that's part of the process, or if his parents are forcing him to go. That information isn't available, but he's still going.
Well, David has been described as a sensitive, more emotional type person, and he wrote poetry, was more artsy. Yeah. But then something just snaps.
And I try to not describe things like that way, but that's literally what happened here. He just
snapped.
No signs, no nothing, just fucking went apeshit. No one is really sure what went wrong on the night of February 18th, 1988.
This year I was born.
It's somewhat assumed that Bernard and his son had a massive falling out over a band's album that David, get this, brought home on a cassette tape and had been listening to. So this argument happens around 11:30 p.m. on Wednesday, the 18th, like I said, and it ended with the elder Brom going to bed. They're done, whatever, go to your room, we're going to sleep.
Right.
David, on the other hand, could not de-escalate from the fight. He stayed up, unable to sleep. It's assumed that this is where he began plotting something heinous and unthinkable.
Right.
But then there's also the side of it, was it just a, yep, I'm doing it, snap, let's go.
Could be. Between 1:30 a.m. and 3:30 a.m., David went and located his father's 28-inch wood axe. He entered his parents' room where he first kills his sleeping father and then his mother. According to one of David's friends that he later ended up recounting the story to, his mother had actually gotten up and taken off down the hallway, and he killed her when she was down the hallway. He then went on to kill his little brother Ricky, who was only 9 years old. And when he returned to the hallway, he saw his 13-year-old sister Diane standing over their mother's body, so he killed her too. And the only family member that was spared was Joe, who we have said didn't live at home.
How does this happen? How do you go from being a sweet kid
to literally axe murdering your entire family? I mean, this is like Lizzie Borden 2.0. What happened?
And not to be gross, but I can understand to an extent, you know, removing all emotion, why some children kill their parents. Mm-hmm. Like, when you hear about that shit happening, I get it. But your little brother and your little sister...
Yeah, he just went on a rampage and killed his entire fucking family.
So the next day, David goes to school in the family van. That's the other thing. He goes to school.
Like normal. Like, what the fuck?
But he doesn't attend any classes. He does, however, talk to a few students, classmates, or friends, that's really not clarified, and told them that he had killed his parents the night before. When David spots one of his good friends in the parking lot, he stops her as she was headed into the school and tries to convince her to skip school with him. It's unclear if he was boasting to her or if he was venting emotionally or just generally what his mental state was at all. But he divulges all the details to this female friend about the crime. And this is a quote directly from the friend. He said he hit his dad with an axe. He kept hitting his dad, and his dad kept on getting up. He said he just kept swinging. David would go on to tell her that it took him about a half an hour to kill his entire family.
Oh, God. I mean, it's not like he had a gun that he had stolen and he went and shot quickly. This is an axe murder. This is grisly and horrific and slow and painful.
Not only, okay, have any of y'all chopped fucking wood with an axe?
It's strenuous.
It's tiring, and those targets aren't moving. I guess along those lines, this same friend said, he said it was really gross and that someone has to be sick to be doing something like this.
Oh yes, my God.
I can agree. You do have to be very sick to be doing something like this.
Now, with that being said, there is some hearsay at play. From what we've been able to uncover, there was at least 1 to 2 friends claiming that David had called them prior to the murders to tell them that he had planned on committing them. There was also another 1 or 2 witnesses saying that he told them he planned to kill his parents days before he actually did. But there is no mention of phone records to confirm that these phone calls happened. And the witness reports from other students saying that he had premeditated the murders is also, as far as we can tell, also not substantiated or confirmed. We haven't seen any official documentation stating that those were trial witnesses and not just kids who spoke to local reporters, which is why we're kind of labeling this as like he said, she said, and not stating it that this is a fact, this is what happened.
And I prefer to do it that way because nothing's more frustrating to me whenever we go in to do our research and then there's conflicting information that's stated as fact.
Right.
I'd just rather say that
this is what is said to have gone on, but not really sure.
Yeah. It didn't take long for the hallways of Lord High School to be buzzing with the rumors of the heinous acts. I mean, come on. This has got to be the latest killer tea for the school. And the administration does hear about the rumors from the students and reported it to local authorities right away, but right away ended up looking like end of school day for them. So during this time, David is driving around town. He stopped to shop at Kmart, at a pizza shop. He went back to the house. I don't know what he did there. There was no mention of what he did there. And then he made a few other obscure stops. But he even took time to color his hair and shave the sides of his head, either in order to disguise himself or to finally obtain that like punk rock aesthetic that he had longed for. He doesn't say, they don't say, we don't know, but we know he changed his appearance to be more punk rock than what it was before.
Alrighty then.
David was spotted around noon withdrawing $250 from an ATM and later that evening by a former teacher at a shopping center. However, when the police arrived at the Brom household at 5:32, he was nowhere to be found. While the school had notified authorities about their concerns, nobody could have prepared the police for what they were about ready to walk into. They knew
that they had been murdered.
Allegedly had been murdered.
Allegedly. But we're...
Yeah. Yeah.
The doors to the household were closed, but David hadn't locked the house up. So first they discovered the bodies in reverse order of their deaths. If you think about walking up the stairs and through the hallways, the order of which you're going to see people. Paulette and the 13-year-old Diane were in a heap at the top of the stairs. Paulette was in the fetal position with her head tragically nestled in the crook of her daughter's arms, which, oh my God, break my heart. She suffered 5 severe cuts to the face and head, and any of these could have been the blow that killed her, where his little sister Diane endured 8 wounds to the head. Like, 8 times.
It literally, I can't wrap my brain around it.
I can't either.
Like, this
doesn't sound real.
Passionate. You know what I mean? Like, this is happening in anger, because 8 full swings. Oh my God. Just, oh my God.
The police went on to describe the scene as, quote, it was obvious someone had used an axe, unquote.
I think that describes it enough. Ricky, the little brother, the 9-year-old, was found in his bed cradling a blanket. He had 9 wounds with a final strike on his neck that happened after death. No more is described there. That was just a point made in the notes, and I'm not sure what all that entails. But lastly, there was Bernard, the dad, who undoubtedly, this is who David's rage was most focused on. Bernard's body contained 22 wounds, with several to the face, hands, and his arms, 6 to the back of the head, and 11 to the back. I'm assuming his dad must have put up some little bit of a fight, which would explain a lot of the wounds around his body. But yeah, this kid did a number on his family in a way that you just don't ever hear about. Just don't ever hear about.
Just brutal. The bodies were already showing signs of onset rigor mortis by the time the police had got there, meaning that it had been at least 12 hours since their deaths had occurred.
So this kid's been running around the neighborhood doing shit.
For over 12 hours.
And he came back to the house where I just can't. Literally, I'm just so blown away by this thing. I just can't even process it. So with David nowhere to be found, the police immediately put out a nationwide alert for David. Because at this point in time, despite the call from the school, they're not quite considering him a suspect, and they almost think that maybe he could have been abducted or kidnapped.
Right.
And then Joe, the eldest child, who is still 19. He's still a
kid.
Is tracked down at the restaurant where he works and then told that his entire family has been
killed,
annihilated.
Where was Brom when the police were at his home at 5:30 p.m. that horrible day? You may be wondering what he was doing. He went to visit the same female friend he had seen at school earlier at her work. Like, that was his priority.
I don't know if this was his girlfriend or I don't know. There was nothing about that. But, like, isn't that bizarre that you would tell this person and then think that they even want to see you later after you confess to brutally murdering
something's not adding up for me with the way his brain is working.
No, I completely agree. Maybe he realized that he made a mistake in telling her and went to go plead with her to not say anything. I just don't know. I don't know. At 11 p.m., the family van is discovered abandoned near Methodist Hospital. A police search ensues all night to try and find David Brom, who apparently spent the night in a culvert at a concrete plant in an industrial area of Rochester. And for those who don't know what a culvert is, it's that large drain pipe that carries water in a stream underneath a road. So they can be massive or they can be about the size of a manhole. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure which one he slept in, but sounds unpleasant.
By the next morning, David is spotted by a witness using a payphone next to the post office. The witness was able to get a hold of the police, and they were actually able to arrive swiftly before he was even off the phone.
I think he called that same girl, by the way.
Could be. David was quiet during his arrest. He went willingly, didn't give up any resistance, nothing. And once he was in custody, he pretty much just completely shut down. He would barely speak, and it was really unclear what his motive truly was. County Attorney Raymond Schmitz told the public at the time that David would be ordered to undergo psychiatric examination and was being held under a 24-hour watch.
Brom was really calm during his 15-minute arraignment in which he was charged with 4 counts of first-degree murder and 8 counts of second-degree murder. The charges alleged different degrees of premeditation or intent, and he did not enter a plea at that time because he just wasn't talking to anybody. As a matter of fact, in the 33 years since the murders, David Brom has still never talked about the killings. You're not going to find interviews from him. You're not going to find articles really quoting him. There's nothing.
Investigators basically had to piece together the witnesses' breadcrumbs that were left behind and the actual crime scene evidence to construct what they believe, to the best of their abilities, happened that day. But the why he did it is still completely unknown.
That was more afforded by the kids that he went to school with. And like we said, maybe it's 100% true. Maybe it's not. We just don't know.
Police found his father's axe, or the weapon that he used to murder his family, in the basement of the house with the teenager's fingerprints on the handle. To be completely honest, forensics weren't really all that necessary in this case anyway. The kid is basically admitted to several people that he did it. He was originally charged with 4 counts of murder and pleaded not guilty, and not guilty by reason of mental illness or not guilty by means of insanity. David's attorneys faced some pretty heavy tasks with this. The prosecutor wanted to move the case out of the juvenile system and into adult court, meaning that a 16-year-old would be tried as an adult, and instead of facing a max of 3 years in a juvenile jail, he could be looking at multiple life sentences. Now, keep in mind, these murders were horrific and heinous, but they were also committed by a 16-year-old.
Who's clearly sick.
Yes. So this is where, like, things really get
He
crazy.
becomes kind of more infamous for the morality of pursuing him legally. Mm-hmm. And you can actually get more information on his actual trial and legal case rather than his murders.
Yeah.
Because it does introduce a moral dilemma. So here's the thing. He's not the first teenager to kill his family. Unfortunately, he's not going to be the last teenager to kill his family. And while it's not totally unique and it's just horrible, there is some sort of mental illness clearly at play here. And that has raised some interesting questions. Was he insane? And how do you quantify insanity legally? That's been something that we've posed over a period of time. Should you try a mentally unwell child as an adult?
Should you even try a child ever as an adult?
Yeah. What I looked out to find was what answers can we have to this, right? Ultimately, that's going to be based on your personal beliefs. My personal beliefs, your personal beliefs. And then when it comes into the legal system, it turns out that it depends on where you live, literally down to what state you live in. In 1988, Minnesota followed the McNaughton-based insanity defense, which many argued at the time was completely outdated, inhumane, unscientific, and unfair to the defendants who are genuinely mentally ill when their crimes are committed. So what is the McNaughton insanity test? First, let's break down what types of insanity defenses states can elect for their court systems and how they work. I know people joke, I joke, everybody jokes, especially in Hollywood, about how the insanity plea can be like, if I ever did XYZ, I'm just gonna plead insanity. As if it's a easily obtainable way out.
But it's not. But it's actually very hard.
Let alone to successfully obtain that. Maybe back in the day.
But look at how many times we've talked about serial killers who were found to be insane, and all that happened is they were put through treatment until they were found to be sane, and then they were charged for their crimes.
Or, they were genuinely very, very, very sick, and they were still tried as if they weren't.
Right.
You know what I mean? So, okay. In order to not be guilty by reason of insanity, a criminal defendant must meet the jurisdiction's definition of legal insanity. So your state court will determine the legal insanity by applying one of these following: the Model Penal Code test, the Durham rule, the irresistible impulse test, or the McNaughton rule. So I'm not going to go into all of those things, but for those of us who are totally unaware that there was one or more than one type of insanity plea, it may also surprise you to learn that there is not some sort of universal standard across all courts in the United States, and that this is literally determined by the laws of that particular state where the crime was committed. Which admittedly, even doing all of this stuff, I did not realize that there were multiple insanity.
Yeah, I didn't really realize that either.
Or any of that stuff. I thought there was like some universal standard that we were all going by.
Nope.
So,
in this case, the McNaughton rule is what they used in Minnesota. And that rule was established in the mid-19th century by the English House of Lords. And it reads as follows. Like, this is verbatim what the rule is.
19th century. 19th century.
Every man is to be presumed to be sane, and that to establish a defense on the ground of insanity, it must be clearly proved that at the time of the committing of the act, the party accused was laboring under such a defect of reason from disease of mind, and not to know the nature and quality of the act he was doing, or if he did know it, that he did not know that what he was doing was wrong. So just to say that in layman's terms and not fancy legal jargon, basically the rule is used to determine whether a person in question truly knew the nature of the crime or understood right from wrong at the time it was committed. Thus, in order to be declared legally insane under this test, a defendant must meet one of those two distinct criteria. So basically, they had to either know that what they were doing was wrong, but they knew they were doing it, or that they didn't realize that they were doing it. It's very vague and would be incredibly hard to prove.
The next bit I got directly from findlaw.com to help better explain because it's really muddy. In applying this test, courts may differ as to whether the wrong, quote unquote, in question refers to moral or legal wrong, or both. Additionally, some states have eliminated the criteria which defines a defendant as legally insane for not fully understanding what they've done. This particular test for insanity has been challenged for a number of reasons. Some have argued that defendants meeting the legal definition of insanity don't always meet the medical criteria for insanity, but then are sentenced to mandatory medical care anyways. Another criticism is that it fails to distinguish between defendants posing a public danger and those who don't, which is really important in this case in particular, or between temporary mental issues or lifelong conditions. So finally, some have argued that this rule makes it too easy for a defendant with a severe mental disorder to escape responsibility for any crimes, regardless of how big a role the disorder played in the incident.
So to boil it all down, here is what we know about David's mental health before the murders took place. He had attempted suicide twice. He was being very rebellious. He was visibly seriously depressed, and he was fighting with his parents. So to everyone, it was clear that David Brom murdered his parents, but they could not understand the why. He had a massive amount of support from friends and even family coming to his side and sharing their shock and disbelief. His friends had even said that Brom believed he was hopelessly trapped in an authoritarian household.
However, the judge presiding over David's case was in a tight spot. Due to Minnesota's laws at the time, he had like two options. He was either going to try him as a minor, and this kid is going to get 3 years max for all of the crimes. And he felt that that was absolutely not enough punishment for said crime. However, but if he tried him as an adult, he would likely get way more time than what the judge felt was fair and wanted to give him. Essentially, this judge was in between a rock and a hard place. In his mind, he was essentially powerless and ultimately decided to not try a 16-year-old David Brom as an adult.
This is a direct quote. It does not make sense that any person, if convicted of the crimes alleged in this case, should serve a sentence of less than 3 years. This is Judge Gerard Ring. He goes on to say, however, the legislature has not vested absolute discretion in me as a trial judge to decide this issue based on what my own feeling of justice should be. So basically, his hands are tied. He can't even say, let's try him as a juvenile, but give him 10 years and he has to go through XYZ treatment. His hands are tied by what the state is allowing him to be.
He's acknowledging that, the kid is sick. He needs actual help. He is a minor, but 3 years isn't enough. However, his entire life in prison might not be the right thing either. I feel for this judge because even knowing everything that I know, I'm fucking conflicted.
All of this isn't even discussing the idea of premeditation. And even if David had been sitting there for days thinking about ways to murder his family, and if it would have been premeditated, it would have been so by an untreated, mentally ill child. So where does that leave us with that? Does that count? Should it matter if it was premeditated or not if he is a mentally ill child? These are details that just... It's so conflicting.
I would have hated to be a member of the jury or a judge.
Because in my mind, I'm thinking this child needs to be put into a mental hospital, be given treatment, and be made to understand what he has done. This kid needs help. He also deserves punishment, but he mostly needs help.
Look at the switch. The switch.
It doesn't make sense. It wasn't like he was this troubled child who was acting out and aggressive, and then ultimately the system failed him and he killed his parents. Yeah. We're talking about a very healthy and pretty normal child that snapped and killed his entire family with an axe. It doesn't make sense.
There was no mention of drugs. There was no testing or anything.
Yeah.
Nothing released saying that he was on some sort of drugs.
Because even if he was on acid or meth or cocaine or something crazy that made him just, then I'd be like, drugs.
Yeah.
Drug problem.
When I was going through some of the YouTube videos, I was reading the comments. Because this case isn't well known.
Right.
Some of the locals were commenting on the videos. And then that is just a gossip train too. My friend said this, my friend said that. One of the comments I saw was, I knew someone who knew someone that was there and they said that he was on LSD and yada, yada, yada.
I've never done LSD, but I've heard it's insane.
Again, that stuff is kind of hearsay. I'm only mentioning it because if anyone looks this up, they're going to see it as well. But regardless, so The state ends up overruling Judge Gerard Ring's decision on October 8th, 1988. The state believed that the public safety would be at risk if Brom served only 3 years, and ultimately it resulted in his October 16th, 1989 conviction of first-degree murder, and he was given 3 consecutive life sentences. He is currently housed at the Minnesota Correctional Facility in Stillwater.
It is worth noting that the state offered expert testimony from 4 psychiatrists. One of these 4 witnesses, who two concluded that David was not legally insane at the time he committed the murders, and 2 did not offer an opinion as to his legal mental illness. Like we've said before, it's interesting that with this case you can find more information on the trial and the controversy surrounding his trial than you can on the actual crime.
What about David?
To date, we don't know why he did this.
Yeah. All you can do is make your own conclusions and stuff. I mean, I honestly, this case did make me sit and think about, how do I feel about trying children as adults? I don't know how I feel. I feel like I need to do more research on it.
I mean, there are some instances when I can say, yes, a child knows right from wrong. But ultimately, can a 15 or 16-year-old fully comprehend all of the consequences
I don't think
for their
so.
actions?
I genuinely don't think
when you're
so.
talking about brain development from a biological standpoint, our brains don't finish developing until we're in our early 20s. We do not have the ability to comprehend every single repercussion until we are in our early 20s.
When I was 15, I gave birth to my daughter and turned 16 a week later. And in my mind, at the time, I thought I understood the intricacies of what I was committing to, what I was doing, and all of that stuff. And now, as a 31-year-old woman, I can tell you fucking no, I did not. Mm-hmm. Not that these two things are even remotely related, but it does make you think. Like,
when you were 16, you think you know everything.
Yeah.
You think you have it all figured out.
One of the attorneys and the judge said, in his mind, in David's mind, the information that they were able to get from him, he had no other choice. Like, in his head, he had created this narrative of this authoritarian family that would not let him go, that he could not be himself. He was creating his own reality,
where
essentially.
He is trapped. When in reality, if he had just been patient for 3 more years, he could have been out of his parents' house and living with his brother and living the life he wanted.
His grandmother and his grandfather still go see him, and they have a relationship with him. So does his aunt. His aunt spoke out how this was a grave injustice. I mean, his family are advocating for him.
This kid is going to be in prison for basically the rest of his life.
Yeah. So, listeners, this is a juicy one. And it's a hard question.
Mm-hmm.
How do you feel? What do you think?
Leave us a comment on the Instagram post for this episode and let us know your thoughts on this, because I'm really torn. Mm-hmm. I feel like there is no black and white answer for this question. I do not think that you should ever be allowed to charge a minor with life sentences.
I can agree to that.
Just strictly, I think that there are certain crimes that I think he could have been tried as an adult, but I do not think that giving him a life sentence in any way, shape, or form helped him.
No, I can agree.
Or is even teaching him a lesson in the long run.
His family said that when they go visit him, there is no talk still to this day about the murders whatsoever. It's never been something that he's talked about with them as well.
But then if you're also talking about prisons and the American justice system, we very much focus on punishment and not rehab.
Yeah.
So this kid, again, probably, he's not a kid anymore. Mm-hmm. But at the time, I'm sure he wasn't getting therapy. I'm sure he wasn't getting the help and mental...
Yeah, it's a cluster. It's a cluster. I will share a personal story. When I was in school, I had a childhood friend that we went to the same school from the time I was in pre-K until about the 6th or 7th grade. And their family lived right down the street from us. Her mom was always at all the PTA things. She was the party mom that came in for all her Halloween stuff. She had an adopted sister that would come all the time. She was amazing, and her dad would come in. He was amazing. Like, they were the class moms. I can't remember what the name for them was.
Yeah.
When we became adults, I hadn't talked to her in like 15 years. Her little sister got in with these bad kids, her little adopted sister, and was dating this boy that her mom didn't want her dating. And he abused her. So her mom went to the hospital after he did these horrible things to her and was like, this is it, you're done. Within a couple days, they had arranged to kill her parents.
I remember hearing about this.
And like she let the kids in the house. One was like 14 and one was like 17. I can't remember.
They were kids.
They were fucking kids. And they waited in the house for the mom to come home and then for the dad to come home. And they killed them with an axe.
Ugh.
They played video games in between the murder. And the girl that I knew at the time, she was studying art and I think video games in a different country. Mm-hmm. And she learned about it through fucking the internet. Oh my God. But there was a whole controversy there of trying whether or not they should charge her sister, who that was said that she let them in the house, or at least or they knew how to get in the house because of her. Mm-hmm. And she didn't actually physically commit the crimes. I think she was still.
Did she know they were that it was happening?
I can't remember. The rumor was that that this was like, my mom's not letting me be with this person that I want to be with, even though he had just abused her. And that's what was planned. But then the other thing that we had heard was that the boyfriend was infuriated that she
was no longer allowed to be with him.
Not sure either way. But I think the sister got tried. I think she got some time for it. I know she got out later and committed crimes and got back in.
Oh, God.
But the two kids, I'd have to look it up. I think they got tried as adults too. And one of them was 14. God. And that was in Ohio. So it's not something that has been universally decided amongst the United States court system of how to handle it.
Yeah. Well, like we said, leave us a comment. Let us know your thoughts.
Let us know your
curious.
Thoughts.
Very torn on here.
All right, guys, let's lighten the mood. I know. It's really sad to compare these two, but like this one was really, really heavy compared to the last one, which was also heavy. But something about, committing mass murder of your entire family is just,
Should we do some memes? Palate cleanser. This is the palate cleanser. Let's see what we got here.
Me. I like true crime. Them. I like true crime too. Me. So there's this Russian doll maker who robbed graves and is said to have made 29 life-size dolls from the female corpses. Them. Oh God, no. Not like that. That's not what I meant.
Oh my God. My little sister has an obsession with cutting the faces off of baby dolls, stuffed animals, and putting them on other dolls. Help. Your sister is a serial killer.
Being a serial killer is much like being a comedian, in that you either hit it big and you get your own Netflix special, or you end up spending eternity popping up on the shitty podcasts.
I was trying to console the wife of a serial killer who committed suicide. I said, hey, at least he died doing what he loved.
Boyfriend, if I killed someone, would you tell on me? Me? No, but I'd use it against you all the time. I'd be like, are you going to walk the dog or do I have to make a phone call?
What's the difference between a politician and a serial killer?
Not much. What?
The serial killer might listen if you plead with them.
Oh my God.
Oh.
Okay.
I heard that 1 in every 5 people from a group have the potential to be a serial killer, so I killed them all just to be safe.
All right, guys. We have one more episode to record tonight because your girls are knocking these bad boys out to make sure we get plenty of episodes and content out for you before I give birth to a baby. So we have to hop off here and get right into the next one.
Oh, we didn't do the Dahmer scale.
All right. What do you give him? This is hard because he's not like a serial killer, but this is so fucked up.
I'm going to give him a 6 out of 10 because it was horrific, but he wasn't a serial killer.
Yeah. I'm going to give him a 7 out of 10 because that is
Some Lizzie Borden
that
shit.
is some Lizzie Borden shit. I don't know if he ever would have done it again. I don't know. There's a lot of inconclusive answers.
I feel like he probably was not a public risk.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm so conflicted. All right, y'all.
Until next time.
Do the damn thing. Like, follow, comment, all of that stuff.
We love your reviews. Thank you so much.
At The Killer Tea on all the social media platforms. We still have buttons and we still have stickers.
Yep.
So feel free to go to thekillertea.com and order those bad boys.
Yep. We'll send them right on to ya.
All right, y'all.
Until next time. Bye.
Join us in the next episode where we discuss Anna Marie Hahn.
Arsenic Anna.
Thought you were joking. I even wrote it in my diary. Veronica had a really funny joke this morning. I don't know why that came into my brain.
That's the one today.
God.
Well,
You made a little mouth noise right at the beginning, and
my mouth is so dry.
But you made it, and then I tried to. There was an intake of breath where I tried to not laugh. Oh fuck. Okay, it's fine.
I think I need a water.
I have a bottle
I
of
drank
water.
so much pot at dinner.
It's fine. Yes, please. Can you reach the top of the thing? Can you reach it? There you were, talking shit, and you're struggling, aren't you? Do you need help? Well, Rob will be in just a second. He can help you. You yelled at me, and I was just trying to be supportive.